the crop circles. And later, we're going searching for extraterrestrials, only on the Paranormal Channel. Terrestrials, only on the Paranormal Channel.
Welcome to a new series of Strange but True. We shall start as we mean to go on with stories of ordinary people who find themselves caught up in extraordinary, inexplicable events. Later tonight we'll be talking to a man who vividly recalls being shot by a Russian soldier in 1855. But we start with a subject that generated an enormous amount of interest in our first series. Faith healer Lorraine Ham works alongside GPs at her local clinic. Her patients think she's working wonders. Until next time, good night.
The response to the last programme was enormous. The credits hadn't gone up before the phone started to ring. By the Monday, letters were pouring in. Before the end of the week, the postman was actually bringing them in sacks.
Lorraine was overwhelmed by more than 20,000 letters. With the help of other healers, she began the long process of answering them all. One letter was from Christine Drake, who was desperate for help, but not for herself.
And the second son, Reese, is now...
I was watching Strange but True with my daughter Alison, and after the programme had finished, I thought I would contact Lorraine Ham to see if she could alleviate my daughter's pain.
I played football with the lads in my class 4 or 5 times a day for anything up to an hour sometimes.
They'll never win. They will, they always win. No, they won't. Come on, we're going to be late for school.
Pain in my back was so bad I started crying with it.
We had to put her to bed straight away, and we hoped that she would get better, but after a couple of days we had to take her to hospital.
Alison came to us complaining of chronic lumbar pain. This apparently was due to a stress fracture indicated here. These fractures cause considerable pain and inhibit spinal movement. I referred her to the Regional Specialist Spinal Centre for treatment and advice.
These small stress fractures seem to be causing the problem. The difficulty we face is that there's always a risk operating in the spinal area.
Can you do anything for her?
Well...
But she's in so much pain.
I'm afraid that at her age, it's just not worth the risk to do an operation.
Well, what am I supposed to do?
Unfortunately, wait. We'll have to see how it develops. The best thing is to wait until you stop growing. Then it'll heal itself in time.
To be told that they couldn't do anything, well, just devastated.
Alison was only a teenager, and yet she was living the life of an elderly lady, almost a pensioner. She was going backwards and forwards to seeing specialists and doctors, and she just wasn't getting any better at all.
After suffering intense pain for 4 years, their best hope seemed to be Lorraine Ham.
When I found out my mum had actually written off to Lorraine Ham, I was surprised and hopeful.
Oh, I can see it's a bit painful.
When Alison first came to see me, she was in pain with her back.
Relax.
And I did healing work with her there and then.
I had my eyes closed and I could feel warm on the areas that she was healing.
Now I'm just going to put my hand under your waist.
A sensation of all the pain drifting away.
When I say open your eyes, open your eyes.
The session over, Alison and Christine went home.
When the warmth had gone and the pain had gone with it, and I could move around without any pain, it just felt brilliant.
I thought it was marvellous. I thought it was a miracle. Alison was doing things that she couldn't do before. And I'd got my daughter back.
I phoned Christine and she told me that Alison was now doing PE and feeling much better.
Oh.
And did she need to come and see me again? And of course I said no.
Good pass.
I had the feeling of having my life back to normal, and I felt like a normal person again for the first time since I'd had the accident.
Out of the mountains of letters received every day, Lorraine spotted one written on Oldham Football Club headed paper. Nicola Fleming had written to her on behalf of her injured husband, Craig. Craig's career was rising fast. He commanded a regular first-team place and played against Manchester United in the 1994 FA Cup semi-final.
Been a frustrating day so far for Mark Hughes. He's been very well watched by Craig Fleming.
Rumours were spreading that United were interested in buying the young Oldham star. Everything was going right. And then disaster struck.
I was playing and just getting the odd niggling deep in the groin and round the hip. Gradually it just got worse and worse as I played. I was playing about 60 minutes. That was me gone when I was shot.
When it actually crept upon us that he couldn't play football anymore because the injury was so bad, he was just devastated and depressed.
It was obvious to us that he was never going to overcome these problems unless he had surgery.
Craig was sent for an operation to repair a torn abdominal muscle.
I was getting a shooting pain across the top of the abdomen. And that cleared that up, but I was still left with this pain in the groin and the hip.
This was a tremendous blow to the club because they had anticipated that he would, after this initial surgery, be back into the fray again.
He was just so fed up because he couldn't do anything about it.
Craig returned for a second operation, hoping it would clear his problems. It didn't.
I had the operation to release the tendon. I mean, that's released a lot of the pressure in there. There was still a pain. Specialists were saying that it wasn't a career-threatening injury, but, you know, after 3 or 4 months, you naturally start worrying about, how serious is it?
So when we heard about Lorraine Ham, we thought, well, why not give it a go?
Craig finally got to see Lorraine.
I'd like to lie down.
He was obviously concerned because he wasn't able to play football.
Just relax.
If you're out for any length of time, there are other people coming up and taking your place. So on a mental, emotional level, there's always that worry, if you like.
I couldn't see what Lorraine was doing, because I obviously had my eyes closed.
Now I'm going to touch your leg.
I got like a strange tingling sensation. It just felt like very strong pins and needles.
I want you to stretch your fingers and your toes.
I was expecting it,
When I say
to be pins and needles, but as soon as I got and opened my eyes, it just disappeared. I've never experienced anything like it before.
Lorraine told Craig to go home and relax for the weekend.
I arrived at the club on Monday, went down to the physio room as usual.
Right, Craig, show me what you can do under your own steam.
I was a bit reluctant to try it at first. I let it go all the way down. Brought it back up, and again, it was no pain at all.
No pain?
Oh, no.
Really?
It's fine, yeah, no pain. So, and then, I was just doing them all day. I was flabbergasted by it.
Very impressive. The rest there. It was certainly exciting for all of us to realise that Craig was more enthusiastic, able to do more, and in fact looking forward to his training for a change.
Propulsion. Go on, up in the air. That's it, go. Leave.
Craig was improving, and it's quite exhilarating. And who cares what produces a result?
Now it's like, oh great, can't wait till next season. He's just so much happier, so much brighter about it all, and it's easy to live with.
Done all the physio, I'd been to see the surgeons. I'm absolutely convinced that Lorraine was the reason behind this pain going.
Skeptics of healing would say that all healers do is help people who already believe. But Lorraine is sure that her healing powers go further than that.
A person who is positive about his healing can improve more quickly than someone who isn't. But yet healing can still work with someone who is quite sceptical.
Lorraine also believes she can heal patients without them actually having to be there. This was the answer to the thousands of needy letters. And so the National Healing Centre in Shrewsbury was set up, and from here, absent healing is sent out.
We now have a network of healers all over the country who meditate regularly, 3 times a day, and we focus on all the people who have written or telephoned and asked for help.
One such person was Ruth Dorrington, who'd badly hurt her hip.
I'm quite a serious club runner, and I train every day. So when I got injured, I had to cut my training right down. I was getting more frustrated, more depressed about not running properly and not racing.
I wrote to as many people as I could and informed them that I'd put them on an absent healing list. Ruth was one of those people.
In her letter, Lorraine told Ruth she would be on the list for 6 weeks.
It did seem that suddenly progress was all in the right direction, and for once I could actually think that I was going to recover completely. At the end of the 6-week period, I felt like I'd reached a stage where I could get back into a proper training schedule and race seriously. Being on the healing list was important, and I don't think it was like a psychosomatic thing. I thought, if there's lots of healers, then all that energy's got to be good, got to heal me, and it seemed to do the trick.
Ruth came out of her injury running better than ever. In fact, she broke several club records, and she believes it's all thanks to Lorraine Ham.
The question that must be asked is, would Lorraine's patients have got better anyway? Reincarnation is an accepted part of several religions, and many individuals under hypnosis believe they're able to explore these past lives. Unfortunately, much of what they recount is uncheckable, and it's tempting to see more fantasy than fact in their vivid recollections of the great events of world history. But tonight's story is different. The past life in question turned out to be the life of an ordinary but well-documented individual. If there is any truth in reincarnation, then what you are about to see may well be the real thing.
Time has stopped. There's no more time. Time, like everything else in the universe, runs in circles. We've reached the top of the circle, and now we're going back. Back in time. You're drifting back in time. You're seeking memories. Memories of things that happened to you before you were born. In another time.
This is the story of Ray Bryant and his extraordinary journey into his past. He believes that under guided hypnosis, he can go back in time to past lives led hundreds of years ago.
Here at last is some sort of proof that there's something beyond.
I've been looking into past life memory cases for the last 20 years, and Ray Bryant's case stands out as one of the very best because there is such a wealth of evidence.
It all began in this unremarkable suburban home in Hertfordshire. Ray Bryant, a journalist, had come to research past life experiences. Andrew Selby welcomed him to join the regular regression group held in his living room.
The number of people in the group when Ray first started coming was around 12 to 15. It was quite a number of months before Ray started regressing properly and anything significant happened.
Leading the group was hypnotherapist Joe Keaton, who's led thousands of people into their past lives. Soon, the first tantalizing clue was to emerge.
I want you to go back. Back to the time before you were born. Keep drifting. Drifting back. You're there. You're there now.
After hypnotizing Ray, Joe began asking questions.
Where are you? What are you doing?
Crimea. Fighting.
What's your name?
Reuben.
Reuben who?
Reuben Starr?
As with many past life regressions, that vital detail, a full name, was missing. But Andrew Selby was intrigued. His diligent research was to open the door to Ray's past life.
I was down in the Guildhall Library. I'm trying to research on another regression. I was getting nowhere with it. So I thought I'd change over and see if I could find something on this soldier. Well, I looked in the index and there I found a book on the casualty roll of the Crimea, and it was all listed by regiments.
The chances of Selby finding a full name to match the fragment given under hypnosis seemed highly remote.
I turned over the pages and I nearly fell off my chair. There, right in front of me, was Reuben Stafford, a sergeant who fought in the Crimean. I just couldn't believe it.
One of the difficulties in assessing the evidence of past life memories is that individuals often recall being famous people or having lived lives that are well documented. The quite remarkable case of Ray Bryant is that he's remembering an individual who was so obscure that it was almost impossible to prove he lived, but that evidence eventually came to light.
Armed with Reuben's full name, Andrew Selby began the painstaking business of piecing together the soldier's life. He discovered that he'd signed up aged 20, that he'd been wounded in the attack on the quarries, and his discharge papers stated that he'd been a very good soldier.
We've got a lot of information here about Reuben. What are you going to tell him?
Nothing. It's a chance to test him out. If he is this young soldier, then he'll remember the details anyway, won't he?
For Keaton, this would prove to be one of the most important past life sessions he'd ever led. Would Ray Bryant know the final part of Reuben's surname?
I want you to go back to the year 1855. It is 1855. Bring out your memories. What's your name and rank? Hey, you! What's your name and rank?
My name's Stafford, Sergeant, 47th Lancashire Regiment of Foot.
7th Lancashire Regiment of Foot.
The group was astounded.
I have never researched into the Crimea. It's not a subject that has interested me. And I have no army background in my family at all.
So if Ray didn't know anything about the Crimea, where did the identity of that obscure foot soldier come from? Richard Wiseman, a psychologist, believes the explanation may lie with cryptomnesia.
When we're young, we pick up far more information than we realise, information from books, films, other people. That's in our memories, but we've just forgotten about it. The hypnotist comes along, suggests we've lived a previous life, and all that information comes out. And in the right setting, the hypnotist and the subject might be able to convince each other that really is evidence for previous lives.
Where are you exactly?
Oh, we're back in camp now.
But it's hard to explain the wealth of accurate detail provided by Ray Bryant as he went on to describe the life of Reuben Stafford, a young soldier who fought the Russians far from home on the borders of the Black Sea.
We've tested him against the evidence, we've tried to trick him, and we haven't been able to break him out of the character. If Ray was acting, we'd have caught him out. If it wasn't genuine, if it was imagination, we'd have caught him out. So my belief is that we've got a genuine phenomenon here.
Where are you? In battle?
The following reconstructions are based on tapes of the actual regression sessions.
They come at us just over a little ridge.
Attack! They're there, right in front of us, looking at us, hardly a rifle's length away.
Are they armed?
Aye.
So you have to be quick.
Quicker than them.
How old were they?
Just chaps like us.
What colour uniforms are the Russians wearing?
Grey. The grey ghosts. Just come and go. They know the country.
It's very much like a dream, but this time you are conscious all the time and you're watching the action. You know what that dream is leading to.
Keaton was intrigued by Reuben's injury to his left hand. Records show he was injured in the Battle of the Quarries in 1855. Ray was still ignorant of the details, but would he recall them under hypnosis?
Is this a good day to talk to you?
Keep up, keep up. Wait for the order. Advance!
The attack on the quarries on the 7th of May 1855 was part of the Battle of Sebastopol. It took the lives of hundreds of British troops.
I had this sudden sensation in the hand. I couldn't imagine what was happening because while I was aware that something had happened to that hand, I could feel no pain. And yet I knew that Reuben was experiencing pain.
Joe was so concerned at Ray's state that he moved him on in time.
It's later now. You're not in the quarry now. It's later that night. Where are you?
I don't know what happened. I got shot by Russians.
Who's looking after you?
Florrie's ladies. They have aprons and caps. White caps.
How long have you been there, in the war?
1 year. 1 year now.
Are you missing home?
I miss my wife and Babby. They write to me. She says all's well.
Well, that's the main thing, isn't it?
Aye.
Andrew Selby's researches didn't finish with the war. He pursued Reuben Stafford through the 19th century, but no trace was found until the last day of his life. A death certificate provided the last vital piece of evidence with which to test Ray Bryant. Reuben Stafford had ended up as a lighterman on the Thames, alone, his family gone. A forgotten soldier, down on his luck. Joe Keaton decided to take Ray back to the day of Reuben's death.
It's the 2nd of April, 1879. Where are you?
I'm looking down into water. It's welcoming. Calm.
With no clues, Bryant had accurately reconstructed the last moments of Reuben Stafford's life and death. Violent suffocation by drowning. A suicide.
Just for the record, believers in reincarnation now reckon you are reborn about 50 years after you die. We'll be back after a gap of precisely 1 week. Good night. Good evening. We have 2 stories for you tonight about ordinary people who've unwittingly stumbled upon the unknown. In one instance, they had to turn to an exorcist for help. I'll come to that later. But first, have you ever checked your watch and found you've lost a whole chunk of time? Or tried to find a place you remembered only to discover it doesn't exist? Well, tonight we have a story of 3 families who are convinced that for a few hours they traveled back in time. Paranormal investigators have a name for this. They call it time slip. Reports of time slip are rare, but it has a well-established pedigree. The first book on the subject was written over 80 years ago. It does sound unlikely, but as Sherlock Holmes once said, when you've eliminated all the alternatives, then whatever remains must be the truth, however improbable.
In 1993, Alf and Eileen Roberts were on holiday in Devon. It was 7:30 and they were heading back to their hotel when they got lost and found themselves in a village they didn't recognize.
We were on our way back to Dunster, found ourselves lost, and we stopped by the green at the top of the village to decide which way to go. And we noticed on the green was this huge wooden sign, varnished, highly polished, saying the best kept ward for the best kept village or something of Bampton, 1976.
I couldn't believe my eyes. It was so brilliant. The tubs of flowers and window boxes, everything was just one mass of colour, blaze of colour. It was really lovely.
Alf and Eileen eventually found their way out of the village back to their hotel in Dunster. They hadn't planned to visit Bampton, but they were so impressed by the flower display that they decided to return the next day to take some photos.
Where's all the flowers gone?
I don't know. This doesn't really ring true. As we looked through the village, everything had gone.
As they headed back to the green, the centrepiece of the display, they were in for another shock.
The sign had gone, the flower bed had gone, it was just grass.
But all the tubs and the flower pots and the hanging baskets, everything had gone. It seemed as though we'd come back or been to a village, the same village, but another time.
Unsettled by their return visit, the couple remembered other strange things that had happened.
On arriving in the village the first time, dropped a cigarette on to the mapping that was laying on the floor in the car. Smoke was coming from it. Having checked that later on in the day, there was no marks whatsoever, as if it had never happened.
And during their journey, time appeared to stand still.
As we arrived in the village, we checked our watch and it was 7:30. As we left, we checked the time again and it was still 7:30, as if we hadn't been in the village.
It just seems as though it was the same village, but in a different time completely.
It sounds unlikely, and yet it turns out the best-kept village in 1976 was Bampton. Equally strange is the story of Cynthia and Len Gisby.
Hello, Jeff. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you, mate.
Pauline, hello.
They invited friends Pauline and Jeff Simpson to join them on a holiday in Spain. They set out to drive through France in the late summer of 1979. It was their first experience of life on the other side of the Channel, and it was to prove an unforgettable one.
We've been travelling from about 10 o'clock in the morning. It was getting 8 o'clock at night. And we started looking out for a hotel, anything.
And we thought, well, that looks an ideal place. A very old world place it was.
Hey, what have we got here?
Oh, isn't this quaint?
This'll do nicely.
I'll get the luggage.
Ah, bonjour, monsieur, dame. Je peux vous aider? Avez-vous deux chambres for three?
Ah, oui, on a deux chambres pour 4 personnes, là-haut, pour dormir.
Sleep.
Entrez, s'il vous plaît.
Oh,
It was not a very large dining room. There was about half a dozen or 7 tables with a little white cloth on.
Et voilà votre chambre, messieurs, dames. Soyez confortables.
The bed was very tall with a big brown furry cover on it. And when we pulled it back, there was a feather mattress with a sheet cover, and it was very hard calico type linen.
It's a bit chilly in here, love. Did you close the window?
See, you're not going to believe this. There's no glass in the window.
What?
There weren't just one opening in the wall. There were no glass in the windows at all. All you would do was 2 shutters you pulled in from the outside.
That meal was formidable. You won't find food like that on a motorway service station.
No, that's true.
Oh, cutlery like this.
Maybe it was made locally.
And the beer?
I've never tasted anything like it before. Still, I couldn't let it go to waste now, could I?
We just thought it was old rural France and had a laugh at it all. We thought it was all part and parcel of the holiday, quite funny.
We did enjoy it, but we did enjoy the food though, didn't we?
Yeah, we did. It was
Really
lovely.
good, the
We were
food.
so hungry.
Synth!
Come in, Pauline, love. Slept well, then?
Yeah. The boys want to take a photograph of us.
Oh, fame at last.
Smile, girls!
The gorgeous girls are here.
Bonjour, Albert.
While we were at breakfast, these two gendarmes came in. The thing that puzzled me more than anything was the uniforms of the gendarmes. I've never seen uniforms like that at all. I think they must have been regular customers coming in for their cognac and coffee in the mornings.
While we were having breakfast, a woman came in with a mauve dress on. She looked as though she'd been to a dance, very old-fashioned type.
They just said they'd been to an all-night party.
She looked very old-fashioned.
OK, Jeff, if you take the bags out, I'll pay the bill. The bill, how much? Payez, s'il vous plaît.
Un instant, un instant.
Pardon.
I asked the police for another exit onto the autoroute.
Autoroute? Qu'est-ce que c'est l'autoroute?
Motorway? Autoroute? C'est Avignon.
Ah, mais oui, moi, maintenant, je comprends.
He had no idea what an autoroute was, from my opinion anyway. Hadn't got a clue, so we thought that was rather funny.
Monsieur, l'addition, s'il vous plaît. Par ici, s'il vous plaît.
Oh, right.
Le dîner, le petit déjeuner, oui, et pour 4 personnes, non? Alors, ça fait 2, 4, 9, 19, le tout.
Hey, Jeff, you'll never believe this. It was only 19 francs.
What, breakfast?
No, the whole lot.
Blake came back and said, yeah, it's only 19 francs. I said, get off, come on, let's go. And we went.
They were so impressed by the hotel, they decided to stay there again on the way back to England.
Are you sure you're on the right road?
I'm sure it was down this road. We turned right at the bridge.
It was a right road, there's no doubt about it. Not in my mind, it was a right road. We went backwards and forwards 4 times and we couldn't find it.
I'm positive it was here.
Come on, let's go.
We gave up after about 4 manoeuvres up and down the road.
The next one cost us 247 francs for just a sandwich and a night.
The next surprise came back in England when the two couples had their photos developed.
I just don't understand it, Jeff. Those photos we took at the hotel, they haven't come out. Here, take a look. They were the last shots before we went to Spain, weren't they?
Yeah.
Oh, hi, Pauline.
We've just got our holiday photos back. Oh, good. Could you check something for me? You definitely took those photos, didn't you?
Of course I did.
I knew I'd taken a photograph and I'd seen Len take 2 photographs. I knew I should have had it on the roll of film that was developed. It wasn't there.
You'll never guess. The strangest thing has happened.
When Len's never come out, I was really surprised, shocked.
It was as though we hadn't taken them at all. Just weren't there, and there was no signs of them having been there.
The shock of the missing photographs spurred the Gisbys to carry out their own research. They discovered the gendarme's uniform and the dress worn by the woman dated from the 1900s. It's almost as if the two couples had travelled back in time. But why did no one comment on their car? And how did they pay the bill with modern money?
With the modern currency, he accepted it. And that was it. I mean, it's always puzzled me.
Strangely enough, bed, breakfast and evening meal for 4 would have cost just 19 francs at the turn of the century. And Len Gisby, for one, is willing to believe the impossible.
The only thing I could think of with all the dates corresponding is that we went into a time lapse. We went back in time.
Cynthia and Len and Pauline and Jeff did return to France a few years ago to search for the rustic hotel where they'd seen 2 policemen in their antiquated uniforms, and in the end they found the right road. But all the trees were much taller than they remembered, and tantalizingly, where the hotel had stood, they found the crumbling ruins of an old building. None of the locals could remember if it had ever been a hotel, but they did say the building next door had once been the village police station around the turn of the century. We may never know exactly how many exorcisms are carried out each year. The Church of England, which has about 250 ministers authorised to conduct the ritual, doesn't keep an accurate tally. The Roman Catholic Church does, but the records of their ministry of exorcisms remain strictly confidential. But we do know that every week, somewhere, an exorcist is being called out. This is the story behind one such call.
It was a May afternoon in Bridlington when a cry for help came to the official exorcist to the Archbishop of York, the Reverend Tom Willis.
It seemed to be a restless soul who needed to receive the peace of God.
The circumstances were unusual. Tom Willis had been called out to exorcise a fishing trawler. A mysterious catalogue of disasters had affected the ship for several years. Skipper Mick Laws was a desperate man.
At first, I was very excited about becoming the skipper of the Pickering, but as time went by and things were going wrong and more wrong, it became the worst few months of my life.
As far as Mick Laws and his crew were concerned, the boat was jinxed.
Oh, no, not again! This is madness!
Skipper, what's wrong? We're going round in circles.
It's got a mind of its own. The autopilot's gone up the spout again.
I got called to the Pickering many times. Most of the faults were undefined. You couldn't really pin a fault down.
I don't believe this. There's no way that this can happen. It's impossible.
Chris Clark was used to dealing with the problems of the fishing fleet, but he'd never experienced difficulties like these before.
On one occasion, I went to the automatic pilot. When we asked the automatic pilot to go to starboard, the automatic pilot would go to port. I changed wires round to correct this, and everything was okay. Later on in the day, the polarity going to these two wires had reversed. Now, this is against the laws of physics.
I've never come across anything like this before. You've got the heating on, mate. It's freezing in here.
Aye.
I was on the Pickering 6 months when the cabin was very, very cold and you could never get it warmed up. You could, no matter what heating we put in, it was always cold. In fact, it was a damn sight warmer down in the fish room with 8 ton of ice down there.
As Mick Laws recalls, even stranger things were happening on board the Pickering.
There was one night I remember when I was laid in my bunk. And the side of the mattress went down as though somebody had stepped on it to climb in the bunk above. Shortly after, it did it again. When I looked out, there was nobody there. I went up into the mess room to ask any of the boys if they'd been down the cabin, and they all said no, and I thought they'd been messing me about and playing games. But as it turned out, nobody had been down there at all, just myself.
The most frightening incident Mick remembers happened one night when the crew were below deck, except for Barry Mason, who was left on watch.
Johnny! Mickey!
Suddenly the door flew open and Barry, with a shocked look on his face, said he'd seen somebody on the deck. But when we all went up to have a look, there was nobody to be seen.
The events at sea started to affect the whole crew and their livelihood.
Going to sea and broken trips all the time. Weren't even making expenses, always getting run off to sea and things going wrong and having to come back. And eventually, nobody can live without money.
What is it now?
Sorry, Skipper, it's done for. It keeps sticking.
Well, that's it, lads. We won't be going out today, not if the winch is not working. Come on, it's all back down the job centre. Come on, for crying out loud.
It was on yet another visit to the local job centre that the crew found an answer to their problem.
Hello, Mick, here again.
All right, afraid so. It's the winch that's gone now. If it's not one thing, it's another.
I'm sorry to hear that.
You know, if things get much worse, I might have to get an exorcist in.
Well, if you're serious, I know someone who could help.
Oh, I? Who's that then?
The Reverend Tom Willis. He does exorcisms. I could contact him if you want.
I had a talk to him and quickly established that there was something very strange going on the boat, and Mike was being very serious. And so I offered to pass him on to the Reverend Tom Willis, who I knew through my connections with the church.
I'm one of the 9 advisors to the Archbishop on occult disturbances. We're all parish priests, and we are called out quite frequently to places and people which seem to have very odd things happening to them. We talked to the skipper and the crew and to a previous skipper, and they all seemed to point to the fact that these phenomena were real.
His investigations uncovered a tragic history to the boat.
It pointed to the death of a previous crewman when it belonged to a family in Ireland, and it seemed to be connected with his death.
The Reverend Willis discovered the Pickering had been built in Ireland and originally named the family crest. On the 1st of December 1977, in rough seas, a crewman fell overboard and drowned. The owner was devastated and sold the boat. He never fished again. The new owners renamed it the Pickering.
Having investigated the history of the boat, we felt that there was a need to exorcise the boat and to pray for the repose of his soul.
Reverend Willis was called to the quayside.
Hi, Vicar. Like a lift. I hear you going down to the Pickering. I'm on my way there again. Come on, get in. Won't you?
He met up with the radar engineer on yet another call to the trawler.
I think you might be able to do something about that boat. We'll have to see. Don't believe in all that myself. I must admit, there's a very odd atmosphere on that boat. It's really weird. Is this the Pickering?
Hi, Vicar. Come aboard.
I hope I'm going to be able to help.
Ah, well, thanks for coming, Reverend.
I think we should take her out of harbour to sea. I don't want to attract too much attention.
Okay. Okay, Roger. Cast her off.
The priest began the exorcism with the reported cold spots.
There's definitely one in here.
Well, we'll make a start with this one then. In the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Ghost, I command all evil to depart from this vessel.
And while the vicar was doing the exorcism itself, we were desperately hoping that this was going to create a positive change. It was costing time, effort, and money.
This is where I felt something step in and climb into this bunk here.
Fine. Okay. Peace be unto this ship and all who sail in her.
Dear Lord and Father, please bless this ship.
I think I've run out of holy water.
I'd like to finish with a short prayer. O Lord Jesus Christ, King of kings, Lord of lords, please preserve us from all evil, and we pray for the soul of thy dear departed. Amen.
The next day, Tom Willis called the captain of the Pickering.
Hello, Reverend. I can't tell you what difference you've made. But the whole atmosphere seems warmer. It's brilliant.
Well, I'll tell you something. You've saved my boat.
I'm pleased to say that everything's okay. No problems whatsoever since that point.
The mysterious happenings aboard the Pickering disappeared overnight, and she's now a successful member of her fishing fleet.
I would regard it as another example of the love of God coming into a disturbed situation and bringing peace to a restless soul.
The Pickering was the first boat the Reverend Tom Willis had ever been called out to. But he says he's now performing more exorcisms than ever before, 40 in the past year alone. Good night. The human mind has the power to mislead us or to distort reality. It is, after all, the filter through which we perceive the outside world. But there are times when incidents can't be explained away by saying it's all in the mind. We have two such stories tonight. One is from what many researchers now believe is Britain's most haunted castle. It's a ghost story that spans the centuries. First, we have a story about faith healing. Skeptics would say it's a prime example of patients persuading themselves that they're getting better, which is a plausible theory. But there's one problem with it. How can you explain faith healing when the patients are animals?
These pets and their owners are waiting at an animal clinic in Totnes, South Devon, but they will not be seen by a vet. Nikki Provost is an animal healer. Her patients are mainly pets which have already been treated by a conventional vet. But drugs and treatments don't always work, and coming here is often a last resort.
I don't really know what happens when I give healing. I just know it works, and I connect with the healing energy, let it come through my hand onto the animal, so I act as a channel, if you want.
This clinic is one of a number which have sprung up to cater for the growing band of animal lovers who believe that if spiritual healing can work for humans, why not for their pets?
We think Nikki can actually heal the animal a lot quicker than the vets.
I'm not a vet and I'm not medically trained. I don't think that I need to know what the diagnosis is or what is wrong with the animal. If after a healing session it's eating more, enjoys life more, that's good enough for me.
There's no way she'd still be alive if she went for conventional veterinary medicine. I know that. There's no way.
Animals aren't able to say whether they feel better or not, so it's easy for sentimentality to override the lack of scientific evidence on the subject. Whatever the owners believe, many vets remain highly skeptical. The vet's professional body, the British Veterinary Association, disapproves.
We're not happy with forms of healing that are not based on science, and as a veterinary surgeon who's been in practice for some 35 years, I am not aware of any case that has responded to spiritual healing.
But not all vets are unconvinced. This surgery in Potters Bar, Hertfordshire, actually allows one healer to run a clinic here every week. The senior partner refers patients personally.
I qualified about 22 years ago, and I used purely conventional techniques for about 10 years. But then I began to feel that a lot of conventional drugs had side effects and could even do harm to patients, and they weren't curing them. So I looked for other methods, such as healing, to help my patients.
Healer Charles Siddle started working at Richard Allport's surgery last year. He now sees between 3 and 7 patients a session.
I certainly couldn't say what Charles is doing or how he does it. I know that he's having a healing effect in some fashion. I know that many patients are helped by it. Of course, healing isn't a cure-all, but in many cases, Charles can do a great deal of good for animal patients.
But the bulk of Charles's work is done in the tough, big-money world of horse racing and show jumping, where only results count. His skills are attracting a valuable clientele. Orion Blaze is a potential show-jumping champion worth over £40,000. He is Trina Lewis's chance of fame in the show-jumping arena. 2 years ago, he tore a ligament.
I was devastated because he's my main horse. We thought he was going to go quite a long way. He'd just gone as a Grade A show jumper.
The vet recommended a long period of rest. That would have meant a loss of valuable competition time. Her friend suggested Charles Siddle.
As there was nothing to lose with it, we decided to go ahead and try. Charles came up, he ran his hands over the horse's leg, and having done that, he then asked me for £25, and I thought I'd been robbed. The next morning, I got the horse out of the stable, looked at his leg, and the leg had gone down. So I tacked him up and took him out for a ride, and he was fine. And we've gone on from there, from strength to strength.
So who is Charles Siddle? And what powers does he claim to possess?
I didn't know I was a healer until I was in my 50s. And I met a very famous vet called Buster Lloyd-Jones, who said that I could heal.
Charles has since healed hundreds of animals. Those involved in Charles's successful cases have no doubts about his abilities. Jessica is a top breeding racehorse. Both her first two foals have gone on to become valuable winners, Nipper Reed in particular.
It's Nipper Reed, clear by a very long way, 10 to 12 lengths, bold bit of front running for Nipper Reed.
Today, Jessica's worth around £20,000, but only 3 years ago, she was on the brink of death.
Someone has suggested using a healer 3 years ago. Complete and utter waste of time, wouldn't have even entered my head. I first noticed a lump on Jessica during sort of routine grooming, just over the top of her left eye, on the top of her eyelid. It wasn't very big, it was about a small pea size.
Here, Mandy. Take a look at this. Looks like a lump. Oh, it's probably nothing. Still, I better get the vet in to have a look.
So, what's the matter with Jessica, then?
There's a lump above her eye.
Jan called in her vet, Mark Sinnott. He's treated the Piper's horses for several years and knows Jessica well.
When I first examined Jessica, she had a couple of lumps involving her upper eyelid and also a few lumps under her throat and in her groin area. It's difficult to tell just by sort of initial first appearances. I mean, that's why we went on and did like further tests to try to ascertain, you know, what condition Jessica was suffering from.
So what's wrong with her then?
It's difficult to tell at the moment.
Well, she'll be all right to have another foal, won't she?
We'll just have to wait and see.
OK, darling.
But when the test results came through, the news was bad.